So let's talk about the 5 foundational things you really need before you start a livestock farm. Here in Missouri, we've got a lot of smaller properties, a lot of smaller acreages. And I had to figure out in the beginning whether I was going to do more of my moving of my cows or how long I had to leave my cows on a place to make it worth staying there. And so I kind of learned to do the math. And the math comes out something like a cow's going to eat her body weight somewhere pretty close to 30 days to a month. So if you do the math, what I've read is somewhere between a cow's going to eat somewhere between 2 to 2.5% of her body weight when she's a dry cow, up to 5 to 6%. Especially if I'm feeding low quality hay in the wintertime, I've seen my cows eat up to 6%. And that's going to have some waste in that, but I always want to figure out kind of what the worst case scenario, what I expect, and then the best case scenario. That way I have a contingency plan for all 3. And so as I go through these 5 founding principles of looking at a farm, going through all the things you need to do before you get your livestock on there, I always keep the 5th principle, the flood plan, in the back of my mind and kind of tie everything into that, because there's things that can happen to you, and if or your help or whatever, whatever's going on, you got to have a plan B, a plan C, and you got to have an idea of what's going to happen when things go wrong, because working with live animals, working with live humans, gates get left open, deer run through fences, things can happen. You could break a leg tomorrow and not be able to. So what are you going to do? So when I'm going through these 5 principles, keeping that flood plan in the back of my mind as we're going through that, always having contingency plans and kind of having an outline of that somebody could pick up off of a desk, whether it's a family member, an employee, or somebody can pick up and say, this is where these cows are at, this is who they belong to, or this is where they're going back to if we have an emergency, this is what they need to eat, something like that. So as we go through this, keep that flood plan in the back of your mind. You can't plan for everything, and you can't get so caught up in worrying about things that you can't take action. But we still need to try to plan for the things that normally happen and the things that maybe push that line a little bit. So with that being said, let's start off. So the 5 foundational things you need before you start a livestock farm, and the reason I'm shooting this video is because I just picked up a new lease, actually on the land that I grew up on. Have the chance to rent that for a few months, and so I was going through this. It's all fresh in my mind. The first thing I want to do when I get on a new piece of property, sometimes even before I rent it, I'll go through these 5 things, or at least the first 4, and kind of have that plan before we even get the rent settled and the lease picked up. So first thing I want to do is I want to go and I want to check the fence. So when you put a new some new livestock on a new property, they're going to go around and they only have really one job. It's to find the best piece of grass or the best piece of forage that they can. And so they're going to test all the fences. So you got to get through and you got to get off your four-wheeler in most cases and actually walk and look and see what those physical fences are like. An old farm's kind of like an old house. A lot of the places that we can find to rent haven't had cattle on them for a while. They're either, the ground was too poor to row crop, or there was too many woods, too many hills. It wasn't worth it. Maybe some old hay ground that hasn't seen livestock for a while, or if you talk to the neighbors, they're going to say, yeah, so-and-so, they always had livestock out. That's why you're getting this lease. And usually that's a fence problem. So we want to make sure that we can protect our livestock. We can protect those around us. So we want to make sure we can protect our livestock, keep them in, keep them safe, protect those that are driving by and around us, and make sure we always have good control of those livestock. And want to make sure we have good control of those livestock. So your perimeter fence is the first thing. After that, once I make sure that I've got my perimeter fence up that's as good as it can get, whether that's taking wire in there or woven wire, barbed wire, fixing what's there, putting a couple hot wires on the inside, however you're going to do that, you got to make sure you keep those animals contained. That's the most important thing. And after that, the interior fencing, getting a plan. So normally I'll do a lot of rotation on a new piece of property, and I don't like to do that permanent to start off with. I read early on, 3 to 5 years before you actually plant a solid fence post. So a lot of it looks like this. This is a hay field. The guy, he likes it cut every year. He used to fight cuckleburs as a kid. It's actually called Cucklebear Hill. And so he spent his childhood cleaning up cuckleburrs. So he likes it mowed off in June, and then we'll come in here after it grows back for 30 to 60 days. We'll put cows on it. So everything here has to be portable anyway. So portable fencing, step-ins, check out some other videos for what I prefer there. And that's kind of what I prefer. If you can get a long-term lease, that's great. But either way, usually you're gonna deal with a lot of step-ins, hot wires. It's the cheapest, fastest thing you can get in there, keep control of your animals, keep your rotations going. So that's what we got. So after fence, I want to have some flow. I got to check out the flow, and flow is that just means water. So time of year is going to make a difference. In the springtime, summertime, when it's hot outside, you're going to need more volume, more flow of water. You got to figure out how much your cows are going to drink per day. I've seen it estimate 30 plus gallons per day per cow. In the wintertime, I don't think it's that much. In the wintertime, we do a lot of grazing away from a water system, especially on a place like this where it's a hay field or a crop field, something like that. We'll set up our portable wires away from our main central water tank. The cattle aren't getting stressed by walking back to water. Shade's not as important, so, and you don't need as much quantity. Now, when you have a bunch of cows together, it's 100 degrees outside, high humidity. These cows all come up and try to drink at one time. You need a large volume and a large fast flow rate. And so those are things we want to think about. I don't just like ponds. I don't like watering. I don't like cows being able to drink out in one end and pass it back through the other end and then take another drink out of it. So if I can get something other than a pond, even if it's pumping water, that's important. Thinking about that floodplain again, that contingency plan. What happens if my pump goes down? You could turn into a pond for a couple days, but if that's the only water source on there, you can muck it up in a couple days. So those are things I'm thinking about. County water, do you have to put that in? You have to pay to put in a tank before you get there. All these things need to be sorted out, because if you don't have good flow, you're going to have dead stock instead of livestock pretty quickly, or you're going to have to move those cattle off. Hauling water, not cheap, not efficient, not effective. I try to avoid that at all costs. So fence, water, or fence, flow, and then forage or food, however you want to do that, whatever your livestock plan is. I'm a regenerative grass guy, trying to build the land up, do things with the livestock to improve the land, improve the soil, improve the ecosystem, while also profiting, taking the cows off as my byproduct. So that's a lot to say that you got to be able to run the math and make sure that you can run those cows as long as you need to, and have some hay for a backup if you're not going to be able to pull them off before that. If you got an off-farm job or something and you only get to work on Saturdays and you're going to run out of grass, or have split that during the week, then you need to have some form of feed, something like that, to keep them going until you can get them off. So have that in the back of your mind. Again, worst case scenario, moderate case, or what I expect, and then a best case scenario. So that new farm that I leased, I kind of did the math, and in my area, from my understanding, and this is a rough estimate, that cow's going to eat, you're getting 300 pounds of dry matter per inch per acre. And so I figured that farm would take 60 cows, 40 to 60 days, depending on how much they're really consuming. The grass is good right now. We're rotating that off to make sure that they're on a medium, their level of nutrition isn't spiking and dropping. That can really cause some issues with milk production and weaning weights. When you have control and you tighten your grazing and you do the rotations, you have a lot more control of that. You need to make sure you're keeping those cattle on a consistent plane of nutrition. That's one of the things that a rotation plan really becomes more important. So on this field, I could turn these cows out here for 30 days and just let them have it all. But the first week's going to be great. The second week's going to be pretty good. The third week, they may be able to maintain. That fourth week, they're going to be going backwards. Their milk production is going to be stunted, and we're going to be causing problems. So by rotating that faster, we keep that plane of nutrition more like this instead of coming down. So that's something to think about, keeping those rotations, keeping that in the back of your mind too. So a cow is going to eat roughly 3% of her body weight in a day. That means over 30 days, she's going to eat about her body weight. And that's not exactly perfect. I think 1,000-pound animal unit, which is what I figured, because I got sheep too, and that makes the math easier. Cow's going to eat about, I figure, 3%, sheep 4%. Wintertime, higher than that. 3%, 3.3% of a 1,000-pound cow is 990 pounds in 30 days. So if I'm not going to be able to leave a cow on a property for 30 days, it may be for me cheaper to ship in hay than it would be to transport cows. With labor and different things like that, that's kind of what I figure. I want to be able to leave them there for more than 30 days. So that pretty well covers food. You know, salt, mineral, basically your food on a pasture is the forage that you've got available, how long you expect it to last, and is that going to work for my schedule. So we got fence, flow, food, and infrastructure. So facilities, fence, flow, food, facilities. Facilities is important. I throw shade into facilities. That it's not as important right now this time of year in the fall, but in the summertime with these black cows, they got to have pretty good shade. It gets over 100 degrees here in Missouri, humidity up 90%. I mean, they really suffer. You got to have some shade. In the wintertime, a wind block just makes good sense. I'm not saying that people can't get away without these things, but you got to take care of your cattle so they can take care of you. Having hills, having trees, putting up bales to make a wind block just makes good sense. You do all this work if you're running in a regenerative way, in a way that takes care of your cattle. They need to be pretty fat before wintertime. You don't want them to burn through those calories, those stored fat calories, just through one extreme weather event when you could have put out a few bales of hay to stop the wind and really help them out there. It's going to save you a lot of money. It's going to save the stress on the cattle, and it's going to keep things a lot better on your pocketbook. So I'm throwing that into facilities. The other main thing is if you're going to turn these cows loose and drop them off on 40 acres, you got to be able to get them in and get them back home or back wherever they're going. You got to be able to treat, doctor something if you've got to sell some or take some to the market. You got to have facilities to be able to contain them and hold them. If you have an issue, if a deer runs through the fence, you need a day, or a car drives through the fence, you need a day or two to get that back together. What are you going to do? You got to have a plan for that. So for me, a lot of these smaller acreages, I got to give a little background on my cows. These are good, gentle, black Angus cows. I've raised them, and they're just, they don't care about a whole lot. They can get kind of, they're cows. When you get them pushed up into a corner, I like to have steel gates to be able to load them onto a farm. I'm not saying that I couldn't take these hot wires out here because they're used to them. I always keep them hot. They respect them really well. I'm not saying that I couldn't do something where I just load a few at one time just with some white wires, but that's not practical when you go to talking about volume, when you go to talking about getting baby calves shoved up onto into a trailer. You got to have a few solid steel panels to be able to corral them. I call them gates. People call them panels. I call a panel the little wire, the big wire fencing. So panel to me is a gate. Gate to me is what most people call a big steel panel, something like that. But you gotta have some steel to be able to get them in, get them onto the trailer. Usually your truckers, you're gonna be faster. If you're doing it by yourself, you got more time. You can get away with a lot more stuff. If you got cattle that came off the sale barn from out west and don't have any idea what a fence looks like or what a human looks like or what an electric fence looks like, you gotta have better facilities. So the gentler your cattle, the more you can get away with. I can do a lot as far as getting cattle up, getting them pinned and holding them with a good hot white wire, but I still like to have a steel gate set up there, 10 to 12 gates to be able to load them onto a trailer. If I need to get something up and doctor it, do you need to have a head chute there? Do you have a portable head gate system? Whatever that looks like for you. For me, on a lot of these smaller acreages, get them up, take them home, give them a shot, do what you need to do, then kick them back out or put them in a hospital lot. That seems to be pretty practical for me and what I'm doing. So that's facilities, shade, your portable infrastructure, your and then having a corral to be able to load them out and get them home, or doctor them there, whatever you need to do. You got to think that through before you kick them out, because if you kick them out and you don't have any plan to get them back up, you're going to have to figure that out eventually. And like I said, if somebody drives through the fence and you need somewhere to put them up in a good solid steel fence, or neighbor's dog turns out to be a nightmare and is trying to run them through everything, a solid steel holding pin is something that becomes pretty valuable. So the last thing we talked about is that flood plan. So like I said, you kind of heard that me go through that process as we're going through. What happens if somebody drives through the fence, if the dog goes nuts, deer jumps through the fence, where we're going to go with those cows? What happens if I get hurt, break a leg, get knocked out for a few days? Who's going to be able to check my cattle? Where are they at? How do I explain that if I'm got a sitting in my armchair, or if I got knocked out or something, I'm in the hospital for a couple days, how are people going to know where my cattle are at, what to do, who to call landlord wise? If you're custom grazing, that's pretty important too. You got to have these cattle identified with this cattle owner, all those kinds of things. You need to think through that. And again, you're going to miss some of these things, but have a contingency plan. Tell everybody where it's at. And somebody who's probably not going to be riding in a car with you, that's important, so that they can know where those cattle are at, what to do with them in case of emergency. Double if you're going to go on vacation. So plan B, C, and D. What if your water dries up? You're in a drought, the pond goes dry. What if your water tank gets a leak in it? Do you just have one? So I like to have contingency plans for all these things, going through all four of those original ideas, those original 4 F's. What's our backup? So anyway, I hope this video kind of helps you to think through this process. Once you do it a time or two, these things kind of come natural. And I'm not trying to scare anybody with my flood plan ideas here, but it is important to have a contingency plan and let somebody else know where it's at. Just like if you were going to go, on a 3-day hike, you want to tell 3 different people where you're going, when you expect to, and then how to come find you, or where to look for you, if you don't come back after 3 or 4 days. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have comments, things that I've missed that you think are super important, what you think of the 5 F's, or if you're looking for a bull, we got some available right now. Give us a call. But like, subscribe, leave us a comment below, and we sure appreciate you.